Does Jesus matter to the sick and dying? Part 2. Two events changed a lot of things at the start of the 4th century. The first was the Edict of Milan in 313 AD. This edict declared that the practice of Christianity was legal in the Roman Empire. The second event was the rise to power of Roman Emperor Constantine. Constantine's tolerance and acceptance of Christianity paved the way for its rapid spread throughout the Roman Empire and Europe. First to be established by the now legal Christians were the xenodochia. These were places that received strangers. They nursed and cared for the sick, but also provided shelter and lodging for Christian pilgrims. They were living out what Peter had told them: practice hospitality ungrudgingly to one another. In 369 AD, the first hospital was built in the region of Cappadocia, which is northern Turkey today. More hospitals soon followed, all of them supported by voluntary contributions. Some of these hospitals were attached to monasteries. By the middle of the 8th century, these hospitals had spread throughout Europe all the way to England. By the mid-1500s, there were approximately 37,000 Benedictine monasteries that cared for the sick. The mentally ill were especially cared for at the monasteries. But this noble example was lost by the end of the Middle Ages. As a result, the mentally disturbed were incarcerated in damp, filthy, and dungeon-like asylums because they were thought to be less than human. Long centuries went by until an unknown physician in France named Philippe Pinel defied the authorities by cutting the shackles off the insane and treating them with love and kindness. He thought they were sick rather than criminal. The results were astounding. At around the same time, Dorothea Dix in the United States was appalled by the inhumane treatment of the insane. She worked tirelessly to get authorities to improve prisons, workhouses, and the treatment of those labeled insane. Her efforts moved a whole establishment to relook at how those with mental disorders were treated. The creation of hospitals created the need for people to be nursed. There is evidence to suggest that the first nurses were widows, monks, and nuns. In the 13th century, an order of Augustinian nuns formed who dedicated themselves entirely to nursing. Around 1833, Lutheran pastor Theodor Fliedner started to care for just one destitute prisoner at his summer house. Later, this expanded to be a 100-bed hospital, staffed mainly by peasant women. All this attracted the attention of Florence Nightingale in England. She went to see Pastor Fliedner's work and was much impressed. Florence determined to devote her life to nursing. In 1854, she traveled to Crimea to treat British soldiers wounded in the war. Little did she know that when she came back to Great Britain, she was a national heroine. With this experience, Florence established the first nursing school in 1860 alongside of the St. Thomas Hospital in London. Nursing was soon lifted to a whole new level. Florence said this: "The kingdom of heaven is within, but we must also make it so without." And that she did. On another front, Jean-Henri Dunant, a Christian from a wealthy Geneva banking family, turned his attention and labors to spread humanitarian aid to unfortunate victims. In 1864, he and 4 associates, together with 24 delegates from 16 nations, formed the International Red Cross. A cross painted red was the chosen symbol of this organization, one that Christians and non-Christians would come to recognize as symbols of mercy and love. In the United States, it was Clara Barton who was valiantly attending to Civil War soldiers at the risk of her own life. Only 6 years after the war, she was the key figure in forming the American Red Cross. All these men and women stand as examples of what Christ meant when he said, "As you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me."